Hello and welcome back to Practical Knife Reviews. Today we're going to be looking at the Ryder Classic Carbon Trapper. But before we get into talking about the knife, we have a new co-host of the channel, Mom. Mom, you happy to be on the channel?
Very happy to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, your experience with the outdoors and knives in particular?
I'm a retired pharmacist and the much older and less cute version of Laura, the former host.
Sure, and what about your outdoors experience?
I come from a very beautiful location, the Porcupine Mountain Wilderness State Park of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and I've hiked all 100 trails there.
Great, so now let's look at this specific knife. So this, as I said, is the Ryder Classic Carbon Series Trapper. A trapper, as we've mentioned, I think we've mentioned previously on the channel, is traditionally a two-bladed jackknife, which means that both blades come out of the same pivot, containing a clip point blade and a spey blade. Now here on this Classic Carbon Series, we've got T10 Carbon Steel blades. You can see this has quite an extensive patina on it, which primarily was due to forcing a patina on it, which I can explain what we did there a little bit later. And it has yellow composition handles, nickel silver bolsters and pins, brass liners, and steel backspacers. So let's take a quick look at the fit and finish. We can see overall it's pretty good. There's a little bit of gapping right here and a little bit of gapping up here. But overall, it's tight. Everything, here is totally acceptable. Now, if you caught our last video about some issues that we were seeing on several of the models in the Classic Carbon line, we're gonna highlight that again right here, which is to say the blade centering. Now, we don't expect the blade centering to be perfect in a traditional. We don't expect the blade centering to be perfect in a knife that costs $12.99, which is what you can get this at SMKW. But not only is the blade centering not perfect, but it's severely off center. You can see that the spey blade is pressed pretty tightly against the liner, and the clip blade is actually pressed so tightly that you can actually see it causes the blade to bow a little bit. And once in a while, it's bent so severely or off center so severely that if you close it, if you're not careful to kind of push it over this way when you're closing it, it'll actually nick the top of the liner towards the end of the blade, which of course is a very, very major flaw in terms of fit and finish. But let's look at some specs of the knife and then we'll do some quick cutting tests. So we'll measure it. Now, should we measure it first or weigh it first?
Measure it.
Okay, we'll bring in our ruler here and we'll take a measurement of it closed. It's just over 4 inches closed. It looks like 4 1/8. We'll check with the clip blade. The clip blade and the spey blade are the same length, so the length should be the same. Here we see that it's about just over 7 1/4 inches long. Looks like 7 3/8. The blade itself has a just under a 3-inch cutting length. And about a 3 1/4 inch overall length if you include the unsharpened section here underneath the kick. You can see we have match strike pulls, 2 match strike pulls, the long pull and the typical nail nick on both the clip blade and the spey blade. The pull on each of these is about 5 to 6. It's a pretty good pull. You can see there's some rubbing right here. I mean, like visible on the blade. It actually wore through the patina on it. And the clip is similar. It's a little bit harder to see on this one, but this whole patina on the end here is just worn off. Now we'll take a weight measurement. Bring in the scale. We're looking at 109 grams, 108 grams, which is 3.8 ounces. And yeah, let's do some quick cutting tests, and then we'll see what Mom's thoughts on this are before we go take it out and do some outdoor tests on it. So we'll try the clip blade first, just on regular old paper. I should mention that I have sharpened this many times. Got a little catch right there. Yeah. The steel sharpens up nice. It's just harder to cut through paper when you're looking at the camera at the same time. So there's the clip blade. Let's take a look at the spey blade. Yeah, you can see we've got it pretty sharp. Not blindingly sharp, but sharp enough for sure. And we'll just do through some regular old corrugated cardboard, since that's something that you'd use in a lot of your day-to-day tasks. Here you can see this is quite easy. Very little effort on the clip. How about the spey? A little bit more effort than the clip. I think that that's just because there's no belly to it until you get to the very end of the blade. But still not that much effort. It goes right through it. So before we take it outside and go test it out on some outdoor stuff, Ma, what do you think of this knife?
I think it's funny because you always ask me about this knife. You always seem to be carrying it. And I guess maybe we're carrying it for all of our spaying needs, which are none. But the knife is obviously one of your favorites because it's always in your pocket.
Well, I've had it in my pocket a lot lately because I knew we were going to be doing this review soon. So I've been wanting to carry it to really get a feel for it before we did the review. That's typically what I do with these reviews, is carry the knife that I'm going to be reviewing. But yeah, I mean, I do like trappers. I love carbon steel. So yeah, that's our indoor look at this knife, and next we're going to go take it outside and do some quick tests out there. Hello and welcome back to Practical Knife Reviews. Now we're going to be taking a further look at the Rough Ryder Classic Carbon Trapper. Shut up, Blue Jay, we're filming. So the first thing that we're going to take a look at is something that a lot of people do with their pocket knives. And I should have mentioned earlier, this, again, being a traditional trapper, is a slip joint knife. There's no lock on it. So one of the things that you could be doing in your everyday life is peeling an apple. I know there's a lot of people that don't like apple peel. I do, but we'll take a look at it anyway. Now I should mention that the edge geometry of, especially the clip blade on this knife, is quite different than when I first got it. I don't know if it was because it was hitting the liner or what was going on with it, but when it first came in, it was not particularly sharp, and so I've done a lot of sharpening on it. And I didn't really bother to keep the same angle on the secondary bevel as it came in with, because the angle on the secondary bevel of these knives was a lot thicker than you would usually see in a traditional knife. So I did end up thinning it out, and therefore the bevel's a little bit higher up and it's a little bit more slicey than it was when it came in. But you can see, and I've mentioned this on basically every other video we've done, I'm not the best apple peeler, but I mean, look at how nice that's coming off. So that's the clip blade. Let's take a quick look at the spey blade, just because I know some people do use the spey blade specifically for apple peeling, since they're not exactly spaying animals around the office. At least I hope they're not spaying animals around the office. Yeah, this one for me doesn't work quite as well as the clip blade. That lack of belly in the middle of the blade makes it a little bit tougher to peel the apple, but it's definitely doable. I mean, I'm getting through it just fine. Cut in a little bit too deep there. It's working just fine. It's just not quite as easy as the clip blade. For me, again, not an expert in peeling apples, since, well, I like the peel. But, you know, the chipmunks will be happy with having the peel when we do these reviews. So that's how peeling the apple goes. The clip blade peeled that just about as well as any of the other knives we've had on the channel. So now we'll look at a little bit of woodwork, since these traditionals, slip joints particularly, you know, a lot of people use them for whittling, and it's something that I've used them for as well. So we're not going to do any whittling specific, but we will just show how it digs into the wood here. So here we have pine, softwood. Let's see how we can feather stick into it. And there we go. Again, keeping in mind that the geometry of this blade is pretty different than when it first came in because of the sharpenings that I've done to it. And again, I think that one of the reasons that this blade in particular was dull is it was, this is the blade that would catch the liner sometimes when it would close, and I think that it might have done that a few times earlier. So we can see some nice, well, that wasn't a great curl, but so a lot of these curls are pretty nice. There's very little effort going into it, so the clip blade is just fine for feather sticking. Let's take a look at the spey blade in the other direction. And again, very little effort. The quality of the curls isn't coming out quite as well. That might just be because of the direction of the wood grain, because I am putting very little effort into it and it's cutting through it. It's just not curling. Yeah, there on another face. This is, seems like it, well, it was going a little bit better. Let's try this board the other way and see if it works better this way, in the same direction as we were cutting with the clip blade. Okay, so on this pine, it cuts through easily, but it doesn't make as nice of curls as the clip blade does. So there's something to note for that. Now we're going to try it on red oak. That's about the hardest wood that you can get in our forest here, so we'll see how that does, and this time we'll start with the clip blade. And here, still cutting through very easily, surprisingly easily through the red oak. And the thing to keep in mind is that when you're using a blade like this, you don't want to push too hard on the back of the blade, because without a lock, it can close on you. Now fortunately, one thing that I forgot to mention is both of these, I'm sure you noticed it, but both of these blades have half stops, and they're quite secure half stops. But again, you don't want to be pushing too hard on the back of the blade. I'm just kind of resting my thumb there. Yeah, I mean, those are much better feather sticks than I would have expected from the spey blade on this red oak. And now we'll take a look at the clip blade, which, again, keeping in mind 30 seconds ago, worked better on the pine. This one, not quite getting through it as well. I think I'm just having a bit of a problem getting it into the wood. I think that narrower angle that I had, well, it made it better for slicing into the pine. It's just letting it skid off the surface of the harder wood here. Yeah, I mean, it cuts through easy, but I'm just staying a bit too shallow. I've got to change the angle of attack here. And I'm just not quite getting it, so yeah. You can see that the story is different for the clip blade versus the spey blade here as it was in the pine. Here the spey blade did a surprisingly good job on the pine, whereas the clip blade, you know, if you persist long enough, you'll get it. Yeah, I mean, I'm getting some curls starting there, but the spey blade was definitely working better than the clip blade in this pine, or in the oak. But overall, I have done some whittling with this. Works just fine for whittling, particularly in softer woods. The clip blade has a nice acute point, and both of these have, oh, I'm forgetting the word. What's the word I'm looking for? Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is that it's got a very acute point, and that makes it nice for working with wood, whereas the spey blade, without having the point, is better for longer cuts. And one of the things that I like about having the spey blade is that if you're opening packages, for example, it's got just enough of a point that you can break through the tape of a package and then just re-angle the knife and go all the way through it without actually worrying about cutting what's inside, because there's no real point on it. So yeah, these two blades, even though I'm not spaying any animals, I do have uses for both of the blades, and $12.99. If you can get an example of this model of knife with blade centering that's not so severely off center, this would be a heck of a bargain. T10 Carbon Steel, that's the Chinese equivalent of roughly $10.95. It's got some other elements in it that actually might help in terms of toughness compared to $10.95. You got T10 Carbon Steel, nickel silver. Again, the fit and finish on the back is fine, not great, but fine. If you can get ones that are, they don't have to be centered, but if you can get them where there's not such extreme blade rub on them, this could be a real winner for you. It's out of stock right now at SMKW. Again, it was $12.99 and it kind of sold out pretty quick. But if you can get one that has this decent centering on it, it would be a good deal for a knife. But with the centering being this severe, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you can see the knife before you buy it. Mom, what do you think about this knife overall?
I think the knife is neat in that you carry it a lot. And the use for the feather sticking technique for starting a fire is amazing. I'm in my mid-50s and my father never taught me that technique. We've been using it around our campfire area, and what an amazing way to get a fire started quickly and easily. So I'm glad that my son was able to teach me a technique that me as a long-term outdoors person didn't know.
You like the half stops on here? I guess that's the final point.
Yeah, I like the half stops.
Yeah, I know that you don't like locks because you always fail to figure out how to unlock the knife. But you also like to have the lock because then you feel like it's not going to close on your fingers. But this half stop is kind of a happy medium. You don't actually have to figure out how to undo the lock, but it is that little added layer of protection where if you do happen to push down on it, it will stop unless you happen to still be pushing once you get to that far, which is pretty unlikely. I mean, if you do have it closed, it's going to stop. And yeah, I think that that's a nice little feature, especially for people who aren't super comfortable with using slip joint knives, or they're used to using locking knives or fixed blade knives. So yeah, like I said, if you can find one where the centering is okay, you can see it in person, for example, definitely worth the money. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend it if you can't see it because, well, if you checked our last video, you saw that we had 3 models from the same series and all of them had this extreme blade centering problems where we were getting significant rub and where it would even close on the liner sometimes if you weren't careful. So that's our look at the Rough Ryder Classic Carbon Trapper. This is MR. It's hard to tell, the model number is kind of worn off from the patina, but I'll have it in the description of the video. Not MR, RR, whatever. I'll have the model number in case you want to look for it, as well as the link to the knife. Although, as I said, it is sold out. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.